Hello and welcome to Mega's Wisdom Now. Today's presentation is the last in the presentations on harnessing, on the 8 limbs of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. We're going to take these limbs and bridge them to the next step in what this site is about. And when I say the next step, I mean everything. So right now, we are going to take these sutras, which is only really one way of cultivating, but it's a very structured and it makes sense. And once you can present it in a clear manner, it lends itself very easily to practice, and you don't need to learn many techniques. It is still not easy to master. There are many misunderstandings around it. And although my presentations may not have been the flashiest, they do contain all the information you need. So if it were me, I would be studying all of that, and then I would come back to this stage of the presentations where all of it can be applied. Now I have other outlets as well, such as Substack and a WordPress blog, and you can look at those for some more applications and philosophical discourse, you might say, on advanced topics. But for now, we're going to talk about how the practitioner of harnessing, as I have described it, and as Patanjali describes it, how this harnessing unlocks inner powers. Before we get into that, please like and subscribe if you do want more of this material. Otherwise, let's just get right to it. In the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali outlines an 8-limbed path to attaining enlightenment through the unitary state of samadhi, which is the 8th limb that we have described. Samadhi is a buildup of the previous 7 limbs. It comes into a culmination. Now, this experience may occur at first in our meditations or contemplations as a split-second thing. Oh, something happened. It was different. It may then extend itself upon further practice until we have enough of it where we can recognize what's going on and confirm that it is what it says it is. But the less we expect of it, the more we're going to get, because expectation can undermine the cultivation dynamic in this sense. That's counterintuitive. Usually when we expect something, it leads toward its manifestation if we really believe in it. Here, the aspiration is what's important. So over time, as you do these 8 limbs, abilities, psychic abilities, can appear because we are triggering them from latency. Samadhi itself is a dynamic process that deepens with continued practice. It deprograms us from the bondage of artificial reality assumptions so that the truth becomes wed in a sacred marriage to our psychophysiological foundation. However, a yogi can literally activate anything they desire through a specific orchestration of the last 3 limbs, tuned to what we feel or feel should be, to what we want or feel should be, the lock to the existential key that we now hold. And the existential key is the process of harnessing. So this is a follow-up practice, and this follow-up practice is called Samyama, and it is described in the sutras, of course, through several verses, but it's never explained in a way that was satisfactory to me. Samyama is a Sanskrit word, of course, and literally means composite mastery. It's the sum total of our discipline. And it doesn't qualify it more than that, but that sum total is an application of the 8-limb mastery. It serves as a gateway to unlocking the full potential of human consciousness. It is, in other words, a profound practice that enables the development of siddhi, literally psychic accomplishments, leading to a state of empowered being. I mean, who wouldn't want psychic accomplishments? We'll describe these briefly in a moment. Now, this is a realistic version of superpowers that are mythologized through culture and myth and literature, but you can attain what the realistic version is through diligence and focused attention, as well as the right frame of mind. We have described these in previous videos. The composition of Samyama is where its name is derived from. It's a combination of disciplines, and these are the three final ones. These are the sixth, seventh, the sixth, seventh, and eighth limbs, which is concentration or localization of awareness, meditation, contemplation, which means awareness is localized onto itself and thus begins to move into itself, so to speak, like the serpent devouring its tail, the Ouroboros, a symbol of alchemy, prominent in the Middle East and Western Europe in the Renaissance especially. When practiced in a sequential and integrated manner, these three components form a potent tool for transcending the limitations of the ego mind, which is the conditioned artificial mind, not the individuality. It's everything not only that we have been taught, but the assumptions our instincts make because the higher self isn't there to complement them. In any case, samadhi stabilizes and grounds the higher states of consciousness that we have just opened the door to with the culmination of the eight limbs. So we go back this time to concentration, dharana. This means that we have a steady localized focus, but this time it's not on consciousness. It is a focus on something specific. The practitioner directs their attention to a chosen object, which is an internal state essentially, because this object is the breath. It is a mantra or a repetitive phrase or word or vocal vibration. It can also be a visualized symbol, or it can be an abstract concept. But for the most part, as far as I know, samadhi, okay, I focus on a rock. I become one with the rock. I understand the rock, but the rock isn't going to give me psychic abilities. What we need for those is for the object of focus to be the psyche itself, not the mind so much or the consciousness, but the very psycho-energetic dynamic as it is expressed through various esoteric understandings. Concentration on the object gives way to meditation or contemplation, which is about the consciousness experiencing the object. That's why these are all internalized. Everything we perceive and experience occurs inside of us. Many have said this, and they are correct. This is a physiological fact. Now, the rift here comes when you consider, is something inside of us? Does that make it just a mental experience and the world goes on all on its own? Or does our world change? We're changing our world. And I would say it's both. It's both, but it's the sum of them. It's more than the sum of the parts. The meditator thus becomes a witness to the flux of their own presence. He's like a sentient wire, aware of the current within it. And that current, as we experience it, is a rising and passing away of interactivity, such as thoughts, sensations, evaluations, as the waves slosh around in the ocean. We are tuned to the ocean, and the waves are moving around us, but the waves are what the ocean does. They are not what the ocean is. This is a very, very deep realization that can extend to other things aside from our core central presence. Now, even this eventually leads to samadhi in relation to that, whatever we are focusing on. So in the highest state of expression, samyama leads to an absorption, an inner absorption, a fusion consciousness, because samadhi is essentially the awareness of unity. And it's the unitary awareness. When you do the limbs, you come to a state of intuiting, or basically it's obvious to you that you are one with everything. Now in this case, in Samyama, you specialize, yes, I'm one with everything, but how does this relate to this specific thing? So This state is characterized by profound peace, well-being that borders on bliss, and a sense of oneness with all of existence in terms of the relationship of our specific focus. And all of this energy, all of this awareness funnels into that relationship and activates something within it. That activation leads to the fruit of Samyama. These are the accomplishments or siddhis or powers of human potential. The true powers of harnessing application. The successful application of Samyama yields a range of extraordinary abilities, depending on the object of its concentration stage. These are known as, of course, accomplishments that arise naturally from the heightened states of consciousness achieved through this practice. The attainment is often shrouded in myth. You expect to be some high sage. You expect to be like Jesus. Be like Jesus. Be like Buddha. These are their own things. The only one you can be like is you. And that is the revelation here, because you are already there. So, because of the outcomes of empowerment, and because power is abused, one turns back and goes, well, if you cultivate these abilities, there is a potential for misuse. Even though the siddhi can serve as powerful tools for personal growth, wisdom, and beneficial empowerment, including and transcending the needs and wants of the individual, you become a benefit to the world without even trying. Abuse of these accomplishments is usually the product of distorted practice, distorted attitude, and that's the subject of another video. At this point, if it's done naturally and in a balanced, sincere manner, when I say sincere, I mean you're not fooling on yourself. You're really, really honest about getting to the bottom of the situation. And you also need an active heart presence, not to be some super loving, who knows what, but where your heart is alive. It's not numb. It's not disconnected. It's Samadhi itself expresses naturally as the unity of the heart field with the environment. And that forms a feedback loop back and forth, and that is undeniable. Some common accomplishments or psychic abilities, you may know these, like telepathy, directing perception of thoughts and emotions, allowing for clear communication and understanding, even if you're not getting verbatim signals. Telepathy can also be nonverbal. Clairvoyance, and not only, because clairvoyance is the visualization of distant objects, events, or energies, enabling insight and predictive abilities, while at the same time you can extend this to clairaudience, to your hearing, you can extend this to your olfactory sense, to your gustatory sense, and your tactile sense, which many sages say is the most important one. Also the easiest to activate, because the gut feeling that many people have is prominent in most of us. Whereas hearing voices or seeing visions is not really so prominent, although it's more dramatic. Now, healing is another ability, channeling and manipulating life forces to balance and restore physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Projection of consciousness, projection of the astral or star body, the energy of one's emotions as a surrounding and penetrating envelope to the physical body, and also the ether body, ether projection, which is probably more difficult because this is tied to the physical. So the boundaries blur with these things. This is a temporary separation of consciousness, and in the sutras, they tell you how to do this, but the result is, if you do this, you can fly, you can walk on air. Well, your physical body isn't walking on air. It's your astral body or your emotional body. It's a coherent presence of self without a physical envelope, although you're still tied to a physical envelope. There's such a thing as mind over matter abilities too, where you can manifest and establish desired outcomes. There is a form of accomplishment called vocal accomplishment, where whatever you say happens, because you are saying it in a focused unitary state of consciousness. You can demonstrate control over the elements, more as energetic states than actual, physical things like rocks and water and, the oceans, but that too. You can communicate with levels of being that are non-corporeal but still exist in the natural world, or that are transcendent of the natural world. And of course, just like clairvoyance gives you predictive abilities, we go precognition. That's the proper name. Or retrocognition, where you can read the ethers, so to speak, and understand everything that happened in the past without having any information sources that are physical. Now, to master this for empowerment, psychic openings imply transformations of both mind and physiology. The aforementioned holistic and balanced perspective, something that I just referred to briefly, sustains and deepens natural integrity. A rote mechanical approach denies the consciousness that consciousness is the center of our experience. We are almost detached from ourselves in practicing. We might get bored or something or want the results for an egoistic reason or a limited reason, because we don't need to deny ourselves as individuals. When I say ego, I mean an artificially programmed construct that sits on top of your true individuality. It tells you what to do, it tells you what's possible, it tells you what isn't, it tells you who to follow, and it injects you with fear whenever you don't. True empowerment arises not from the faculties themselves, but from the profound understanding, compassion, and wisdom that evolves through the journey in engaging with them. Typically, the requirements are consistent practice, a qualified guide. Now, consistent practice, of course, is a no-brainer, but if your time is being hijacked by society and all of this, I am not one to say, well, you better do it or else. I do not like to listen to that, so I'm not going to say it. But consistent practice is that your aspiration reaches a point after you keep trying, hit and miss, you start, you stop, you do all these things. That's why patience is important. But consistent practice should be natural. And the qualified guide, if you are basing this on the 8 limbs where you've actually developed a certain connection to the unitary consciousness and the connection to the inner divine spark known as Ishvara, very close, if not identical, to the Christ consciousness concept, then the guide is within. The problem is, if you don't have that cultivated and your intuition is still hijacked by programming and you're not necessarily aware that this is the truth, you may run into problems. So that's something you need to think. This is why I presented all these yoga. And of course, this is not the yoga that's popularized. This is harnessing. This is the yoga of internalization, the yoking, the unification of our internalized state. So what we want to do, though, in our practice is not to be in the monastery, not to extend our experiences that we may have on a retreat or in isolation, which are also useful if not necessary at points. Integration with daily life is why daily life is there, spiritually speaking. We apply these principles into our daily activities. We can wait in line. We can tune in. We're forced to do something and not act, we can tune in. We can take a second off, we can tune in. We can catch ourselves before we respond, and we can tune in. All of these relationships and interactions with the world around us become a means of accelerating the process and making sure that we get the feedback that will tell us if we're going too fast, too slow, or not in the right way, so to speak. All you need to do is, if you feel hesitation, is get back, internalize, forget about moving energies and all of that, but just open up the heart and the mind and ensure that the body is grounded and touching grass, so to speak. And okay, ask. Ask and open. And don't move into practice until you get an answer or a sense of it or something that makes sense to you, a dream, whatever. Something will come. But be patient. Sincere relationship with our inner world is a result of that and leads to that. Sincere relationship with our inner world where we're not fooling ourselves and we're not buying into everything that we perceive, but we maintain a state of discernment. Sincerity will make it obvious that the cultivated abilities are side effects of a deeper spiritual unfolding. There is no issue of misusing powers because it runs contrary to the nature of the abilities and themselves and undermines their effectiveness. I mean, some people don't care. They just go, well, give me the power. And then they realize that the effectiveness is being undermined and they have to adopt parallel practices that may be unethical, parasitic, and manipulative. To master Samyama, emphasizing liberation from all levels of contrived conditioning as opposed to inner organic adaptation and relationship with existence is paramount. In other words, we are not removing ourselves from the world. We are not removing ourselves from nature. And especially, we are not removing ourselves from ourselves. We are adapting to the new awareness because that's what it's for. It becomes a central core around which the rest of us goes, all right, we can change. Energies can move. It's not going to blast me. Demons aren't going to come in. All this craziness isn't going to happen because that central sun of our true self is there gravitating everything in its proper place. If you can practice Samyama without fooling yourself, the greater good not only includes you, when they say, well, all of this has to be done for the greater good, but the greater good not only includes you, but revolves around you, because it is you, capital Y. There is a difference between small y and capital Y, but that difference is not one of separation. It's one of harmonic blending. One is the carrier wave of the other, so to speak, and separating this leads to dissociation and ego compensation. Now, Samyama is perfect and has been adapted to another methodology that is very similar to the Sutras, only I'll describe the differences here. Okay, basically we're merging two different spiritual currents that are overlapping, complementary, and meant to be two parts of a whole. Tantra is an ancient spiritual tradition originating in India, and it's often misunderstood as a license for sexual indulgence, which is something that came from Victorian English people who, that's where their mind was, of course, because they repressed it. Now, at its core, Tantra is a path of deep self-realization and spiritual growth. The whole path is meant to include and complement the unfolding described in the Sutras. It is built upon that. Tantra evolved after the Sutras were written, whereas its techniques reach the greatest potential when they become applications of Samyama. That's the point of this video, in fact. You can learn magic. You don't even have to apply Samyama to Indian things or whatever the Sutras say in that specific chapter. You apply Samyama in Kabbalah, you can apply Samyama in Solomonic magic and Hermetic work, you can apply it in witchcraft, in Wicca, in natural magic, in paganism, anything you want. In Christianity, you can apply Samyama. And it doesn't lead to the devils and all that crap, because give me somebody who does it right, and I will show you somebody who is in tune with the sacred. Tantra was said to be developed contrary to the Indian caste system. That's, it developed from the common people. It says, we want to do this too. We don't want to have to be incarnated as Brahmins to do this, or soldiers or merchants at best. We want those untouchables at the bottom of the social ladder to be able to spiritualize as much as anybody else. So it's an inclusive, tried and true practical expression of yogic potential, mystical potential. And as such, it is said to lead to the ultimate empowerment of self-integration. People were practicing the sutras. They go, this is too ungrounded, I don't know. Well, it's a step. Because back before Tantra was made official through various writings, the teachings were done. And insights about the nature of consciousness, of what you expect to feel, how to do it, how to stimulate it, the application of mantras especially, mudras, energetic systems, more advanced breath work, etc., etc., etc. All of these accelerate the path based on the sutras themselves, which one Swami, Vivekananda, called, well, this isn't like the other yogas. This is Raja Yoga. This is the king of yogas. From here, you can do anything else, as long as you understand not just that it has been mastered, but what has been mastered. And by mastery, it's not some impeccable perfection. It means you are competent in application. The rest is progress. So the vital forces, the vital forces that arise through up the spine and have been given the name of Kundalini energy, and the various focuses, which are Samyama, on the chakras, on centers of energy along our middle pillar, all of these lead to the most powerful experience, to the point that it's so powerful, as Sadhguru says, it's powerful because it's potent. And it's potent because it's powerful, and that makes it dangerous. Potency and power are the same word. Sorry, I use a synonym here. Anyways, the merging of Samyama and Tantra is something that is natural. Even though you can merge Samyama with any other spiritual practice that is very technical. So Samyama injects spiritual truth into the technique. Even the physical yogas and stretches are meant to be done as a practice of Samyama, so you awaken the inner channels. Although I don't see it done in how it is taught. With all the yoga studios out, you should have an army of enlightened people or people who are becoming less and less conditioned. Now, combined with the awakening of the heart center, which is very, very important and a subject for another video, although there's several videos on it, I will give you a slightly different perspective. But all of this applies Kundalini stimulation in the safest deliberation of the process. This is what a guru or a teacher would tell you. He wouldn't tell you, okay, do it this way, do it. Yeah, they would, because you don't have Samyama. The teacher might say, we're going to start from Laya Yoga, the yoga of dissolution, where Kundalini practice is prominent. And then you need to be careful. But the other stage, Patanjali himself says, look, the inner guru is the most important, okay? So the need for a teacher, an outer teacher, a person, is then replaced by the cultivation of discernment and higher access. See, the first thing you do is you cultivate the teacher. Then you cultivate the individuality. Then you cultivate the energy and down through the physical body. The teacher is the true spirit. Through intensive spiritual practice, the tantric practitioner engages in diverse activities, etc., etc., etc. You have all kinds. Like I said, breath control, more advanced, hand gestures, various body forms, etc., etc. The point is to take on the role of a goddess or a god, whether you're male or female, because the goddess is a force that's felt and experienced and tangible. The God is consciousness. And of course, the identities may alternate, but the God principle is the principle of spirit. The goddess principle is the principle of substance, energy, force, matter. They are both divine and they are complementary. So a person perceives themselves in the world in a more multidimensional perspective. I don't think I need to get into what all this can do, because the bottom line is that wherever you are with harnessing, you don't have to push the envelope to have some profound dramatic experience. The important thing is that when you recognize that your meditation or contemplation has moved to expand your sense of consciousness, you stick with that, and it's a process that leads to the sense that everything's interconnected. And even your kundalini may rise in that sense all on its own, because you may feel energies moving in the body because your focus dissolves blocks, it dissolves tensions, it creates a vibration that moves through the nervous system and the brain. In the modern sense, the engineer and inventor Itzhak Bentov was asked by the CIA to give a model of these psychic accomplishments and even of the Kundalini process. And along with another researcher named Lee Sanella, they came up with a physio-Kundalini theory where the heartbeat itself vibrates the brain as it moves up the aorta, and the brain is piezoelectric, and so internal currents are created, and these internal currents are moving until various conditionings are dissolved, because the force of them will physiologically dissolve these conditionings. That physiological dissolution, however, is one and the same with the consciousness that guides it, so it can flow. Consciousness is blocked, but that doesn't mean it's gone. It's just not flowing through the nervous system to interconnect all aspects of your brain and body into this unitary state, which Eckhart Tolle calls presence. And it is presence. It's not the same as sensing energy quite. It's a different level of sensing. It's the sensing of the presence of consciousness, which is almost like attention. Attention in reality. That's different from the way reality itself as an external thing is configured, or something we observe, etc. But the tension of consciousness, the medium of consciousness, is like an ocean made of rubber where you can feel the texture of its stretchings and its contractions, but knowing that the very substance is what the basis of that reality is. With each subsequent peak of consciousness, you access higher planes of awareness. The sky's the limit, and all of the wonderful things you've heard about ecstasy and the orgasmic energy moving through and blasts of light and all of these things, they come through this. And they're not supposed to be, well, that's it, now you're some great being. You're a traveler of all these states. There's no, you go back and forth and you weave them together and you go, well, I want something more than any of these, something that's more the sum of its parts. And that's a natural evolution and will be aligned with who you are. Karma is not punishment. It's simply the structure of events that your own dispositions, aspiration, and true individuation have inspired. Mistakes along the way are corrected because this structure is you, so you can't escape it. So if you atone, if you compensate, if you balance, and if you heal, the karma's good. Otherwise, it reveals the necessity to do these things. Risks diminish when practices are done in an artful combination of balanced structure and applying and embodying forces of existence that one respects and honors. There's no need to worship in the religious sense. It's enough to love and be receptive with aspiration toward communion. While ultimately the steps along the way may be slow to reveal themselves in terms of results, there is a pattern of progression. And this pattern accelerates and it modulates because we live in a world in crisis. So even our progress is going to reflect that crisis. It is almost better to experience all these things in an environment that is where you are, because that reflects everything that you are or have been fooled to pretend to be. Consider it that way. So wherever you are is what you need to deal with. Any spiritual commentator, shall we say, will tell you that. So each step is an opportunity for improving. Not only one's condition of embodied being, but the very encounter within, without, and beyond. This can actually not just change the world, but redeem it. And that's all we have for today. Thank you for listening. Megas out.